people? Welcome back. The season started, man. Unfortunately, welcome back to Box Party. I'm your host, Mike Wahle. Thanks for watching. If you're enjoying, please subscribe, rate, and review to iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio. You can find our videos on Process to Perform channel on YouTube. Hit me up, Mike Wahle68 on Twitter, and Process to Perform on Instagram. Our show, as always, is sponsored by Bet Online. Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform for your number one source for everything football. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? And get on to our $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. That's in all caps, by the way, because that's how serious that is. When the game's over, head on to our online casino and get into a game of blackjack, poker, or unwind one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. And listen, we just got it started how it is, right? Like the Packers played in this Brazil game. We go down, play the Philadelphia Eagles. There's all this talk before, I guess it was false news, but there's all this talk about like the green uniforms and can you wear green in the stadium because it's like a red team. They don't have rivals back. That wasn't a real thing. And Eagles end up winning the game 34-29. And look, this was actually this is as well a game as you're going to play with the conditions that they were given. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this, or I just want to be as honest as possible. Like I would, if I'm a fan, if I'm a player to some extent, there's always things we're going to be able to take away, but I'm throwing this game away. The turf, the conditions were so bad out there that football's not meant to be played on ice skates. And when you're really watching this game, like the aggressor is always going to have the advantage when a field is that poorly fashioned. And just so for fans who don't know, there's a remarkable difference between a soccer pitch and the depth of the roots and the type of grass and the way that they just go about manicuring that, and a football field. And when you put 300-pound dudes in big cleats on a football field, it gets ugly real fast because it's a different kind of power, it's a different kind of engagement. And this game, unfortunately, and it's even worse when you watch the tape, this game was more about the turf than the players. And again, when we talk about expanding the league, player safety issues, it goes back to the same stuff. I'm sure they'll come out and say this was a rousing success, and they checked it with the professionals, and bullshit. But good Lord, man, like this is an important game for these teams. There's people that can get hurt in these games. It's dangerous enough as it is. Our quarterback goes down, and you start looking at everything that happened, and you look at both sides of the football. Certainly, the more aggressive team is going to have better footing. I'm not saying that the Eagles weren't the better team of the night, because I think they certainly were. But this is one of those games where, if I'm looking at it from a player's perspective, after I watch the tape, I make kind of the mental mistakes. I'm going to throw a lot of the physical stuff out because, quite frankly, guys, I've played on field conditions like this, and you just don't know which way's up. There are a lot of correctable issues on this tape, but even with some of the run fits that we're going to look at later, when you start breaking it down, like, why is this happening? A lot of it's happening because guys are literally on roller skates for half the time. They don't have good footing. They're unsure about themselves. And you've got another on the other side of the football, particularly our defense versus their offense. You've got the other side of the football where they have a really good interior offensive line. Guys are moving and sustaining blocks and going in the same direction. And it's very difficult for our defensive linemen and our linebackers kind of read that through when there's just kind of a sloppy, not deliberate movement. We did a great job for the most part of bottling up that running game, but then you see these big runs break out. It's almost an inevitability, and you saw it on both sides. I mean, they certainly, I think bashed us for less than 2 yards of carry in the first half before we started going to a little bit more of our gap stuff. And Josh Jacobs had, some really good runs, ended up, I think, with over 5 yards of carry. But if you watch kind of the quality of the game, when I'm watching it live, you're going like, oh man, you're missing Aaron Jones, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, like, there's some ways that we can be better, but there's so much of this that is influenced by the field conditions that it's tough to think of anything but let's just move on to next week. Having said all that, the Eagles turn the ball over early. You got to put points on the board. I mean, there's just things in football that you have to be able to do. Both teams are playing with these conditions. You got the muff snap, you got the early pick. Like, this game should be in different context by halftime, and instead, I think we're down 17-16 at halftime. So you've got a couple big plays from AJ Brown. You have the big play by Saquon on the wheel route. Now they're in the driver's seat. That's a whole different kind of ball you're on, especially when you got the offensive line that they have, the running game, and then obviously AJ Brown on the outside. Um, but overall, let's start with the offense because our it's hard to say that are we going to complain about a 29-point game? You talk about there's some penalties and miscues early in the passing game. If you watch the game with some scrutiny and you take away kind of the slips on the routes and all the kind of mistiming because I think because of the turf, and obviously we have some clear deficiencies on the offensive line. We should have dropped 40 on that team. I don't think that's a great defensive football team. Certainly not like it was a couple of years ago. Jordan Love obviously gets hurt. We'll talk about it later, but he finishes 17 or 34. He's got 260 yards. He's got 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Obviously, too many drops, too many misplaced balls. You're going to see on tape like there's some footwork stuff. He's still a little bit of not always throwing under his structures. Always his footwork and everything isn't necessarily where you want it to be at some point. I think he has that Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers mentality of we're going to be able to kind of wing the ball out to the sideline and just get lucky it's not a pick six. I think for me, um, there was, you look at the general scheme and the direction of play and what you're trying to do. I mean, we've got some real talent on this offense. Yeah, the Jaden Reed obviously showed what he can do this weekend. Josh Jacobs, certainly when you get pointed downhill, can run through tackles. He's a very, very powerful runner. I think we're going to see this more likely than not. If you look at the course of his career, the second half is going to be better than the first half. He's kind of a wear you down guy, and then you're going to get more breaks and more breaks. It's a question of, can Stenovich and Matt LaFleur get to the right play calls? How early can you get to the right play calls to understand what's going on? The Eagles defense is shifting around a lot early, giving our guys real fits. Once you get those solid double teams, you start pulling some guards, and then you work on the double doubles with essentially 2 double teams inside. When those guys moving around are going to be to our benefit. Josh Jacobs really starts having some nice runs. Defense opens up, and certainly that opens up opportunities in the passing game. Emmanuel Wilson and Josh Jacobs, both end up having some big plays. I think that's an encouraging thing. But the night's really about, I mean, if you're just looking at who's the breakout star tonight, Jade Reed, right? He's got runs a touchdown in. Casses the wide open touchdown. We'll show that one. I think our receiving core is only going to get better and better and better. And now when you look at this team, it really comes down to where's the weak link, and then how fast can we fix it? And if you look at this team, offensive line wise, now obviously Malik Willis is going to be in the quarterback, but we're talking about long term. Offensive line wise, that's where we look and go, okay, when are we going to be able to kind of assert our dominant personality? Do we have a dominant personality to assert? Elgin Jenkins played a phenomenal game. The only thing that got in his way was the turf. A couple times, I mean, quite frankly, you lose your footing, you get flat backed, or you miss a block that you're usually going to get. But this guy played a phenomenal game. It's one of the better games I've seen him play in years. I just thought he was physically dominant. Zach Tom, obviously, real deal as well. He's such a fluid mover. He can extend his arms. He plays extended away. He keeps people away from his body. He creates that time between the defensive lineman and himself. I think you've got a couple things you got to look at. Long term, they didn't really get a replacement for Josh Myers. Is he going to continue to develop and improve the right way? After watching this game, there's just kind of the same. It looks exactly like last year, good and bad. And then at the right guard position, I've said this for years, it's really difficult to develop when you're always looking over your shoulder and you're always having to switch in and out of these, who's going to be in the next series scenarios. It's just hard to get a rhythm. I know guys you're supposed to say, oh, I like the competition. No, it's like nobody likes that. Nobody really embraces that. What we're trying to do is get into a feel for the game, understanding at an intimate level what that defensive tackle or those defensive tackles are trying to do to you, just being a little more aware of the linebacker position and what that means. And you see with Sean Ryan and Jordan Morgan, both those guys have their moments, have their downsides. But I guess for me, if you draft a guy in the first round, Sean Ryan's been there. I think now this is his third year, and Sean didn't really make improvements from a technical standpoint. Like the deficiencies that he had with his hands, just kind of his body positioning, just trying to maul everybody. That's still there. His kind of inability to change reroute and change direction at the second level is still there. Um, I'm probably if I'm the guy, if I'm the offensive line coach, if I'm the coordinator, I'm probably just going to start Morgan from now on and just deal with it. Just let's let the growing pains kind of play out. And I say that not because Sean Ryan played necessarily a poor game, but if it's based 50-50 as far as performance goes, let's say outcome, and you're thinking, okay, this who's got a bigger upside and who's made more strides in the last 6 weeks, or versus three. Like I think Jordan Morgan's made more strides in the last 6 weeks from when I saw him, and when I look at Arizona tape versus now, from Sean Ryan from rookie year versus now, I think Jordan Morgan's made longer, better strides, maybe, or at least that tempo is a lot more accurate. He plays a little more compact as far as plays within his framework. Again, the hands outside thing, especially when you're playing against good players, is bothersome. You can't just be a mauler in this league anymore, and I don't know that Sean's got that kind of that hip strength. Um, that is a really good like Philly / Georgia defensive line. Those defensive tackles are players, and you see the difference in a real quality. Jenkins on the left side, and then kind of what you're dealing with on the right. Not that it was terrible, but you know, uh, I just don't think that. I just don't think that this experimenting like this, this is why you have preseason games. Like we should have figured this out already. It's I know this is the name of the game in the NFL now, but the other name of the game in the NFL is like if you're an interior offensive lineman, you have to be able to win with your hands. If you can't, this is a tough road. And right now, like Sean Ryan doesn't show that he can. So with that said, let's get to some tape. Go offense first here, guys. So I think it's one of the earliest, maybe the first run of the game, and it's just not ideal. So the Eagles team is going to slant, and Jenkins is really the only guy who kind of has this pegged. You just got bodies everywhere. We've got the left tackle, the right guard whiffing on his play, guys in the backfield, and again, pre preseason football was important because every single one of these guys is tipping where they're going, and whether we're not identifying that on tape or whether we're not just getting enough reps to understand and be comfortable with the footwork, like that is an automatic response. I see something that I've seen on tape. I need to step with my right foot instead of my left foot, or with my left foot instead of my right foot. Like you don't do it, and if it's that obvious, like if it's that obvious to me sitting here, I can't imagine what it should look like to the guys that are studying this for 20 hours a week because it's their job. These are big time throws by Jordan Love, and we're just showing this one in the middle slot. I think this to Dobbs on the out. Like, not a lot of dudes in the league can put this ball down. Obviously, a great catch, but this is what, every time that he, you know, has steps into a throw, it's that's a very very difficult, very very special throw that he just makes look routine. So Wicks is officially my new favorite wide receiver, man. First of all, he got this like wheel motion. Let me get back to this. I mean, this guy's awesome, right? So they put him in this like whirly bird motion. He comes back down that lead fullback, why not? Right on the safety. Comes downhill, gives him everything he needed, and and then just tries to get a little bit more later on. Now on the backside, we got Josh Myers getting backdoored, and his guy ends up getting on the tackle. So we got Wicks making the play in the box. We need our center to do the same. Now, details. We talk about Sean Ryan, and this is just a reps thing. And again, this is a preseason thing, but you also have to identify here details of the sport. If you put your inside hand, so his left hand, on that defensive tackle and turn your shoulders at all, and you're going to that middle linebackers in the A gap between the center and the right guard, like you're not getting them, especially the Philadelphia Eagles defense. You're just not getting them. So he takes a decent step. He just puts that hand in for a half second, but now his body position square when it should be angled. Can't get through. Gets beat inside. Tackle when we have a good play, right? So details matter. Wasn't a hard thing, right? Probably reps it every day, but If you allow it, you're complicit, and if you're doing it on your own, not smart. I I had to put this in here, man. The safeties for the Philadelphia Eagles early in this game. So you run a play like this, you see Jaden Reed's has come backside, and this is essentially like the old kick play, but they're going to actually kick out the corner because they think the corner is going to make the tackle because the safety's so deep. Safety comes from depth and just tornado tackles this guy with like a spin on Jacobs. I was really impressed early on. If you're talking about tone setters in this game, nothing like Brian Dawkins back in the day for the Eagles, but these guys did set the tone. Really impressed with the way they came downhill. This is what we're talking about early in the game as you go back and watch it and you go, man, like, what's the difference in the run game? What's going on right now? There's obviously a couple plays like I showed early, but there's also just holding calls, these penalties that kill you, unforced errors. This is a situation where if you're turned with your chest to the sideline like we are here at the tight end position and hands out extended pulling in, this is a little bit different for me than like you're in the pocket, the quarterback scrambles out. This is a situation you really should be as square as possible to the line of scrimmage. So if you've turned your body and you're pulling this guy away, like unforced error, man, totally unnecessary. And this gets us down to the 5 or the 4 yard line, and all of a sudden now we're backed up another 10. I think that was after one of the big turnovers by Hurts or the center quarterback exchange. So under center play action, I absolutely love this. But you see the depth of the linebackers, you see the pocket, you see the depth of the safeties. They've done everything right. They schemed the right play. The only thing they didn't plan for is this bush league field that I'm sure was hailed by Goodell as a great success. But we slip on the route, can't make the play. And look, man, in the Green Bay Packers, with the field that they have, you got to think to yourself that they would know what cleats to wear. Do I need to wear longer spikes? Blah blah blah. But you got to understand these days, like Nike, they don't make those cleats anymore for wide receivers. Like you have to put on a whole new shoe. Like the speed cleats that you like the soccer cleats that these guys are wearing sometimes that they wear all year. They don't make them with the screw ins anymore. So you have to actually try on a different shoe, and a lot of guys aren't comfortable with that. Listen, I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying, like, why don't we just make sure the field's in better condition? So we kind of bumble through the running game a little bit, and they finally find the plays that are going to work. So guys are moving. So if let's just think about how we're game planning this, right? If guys are moving on the defensive line, what can we do to make that an advantageous situation for us? Well, we got to catch them because when the guys are moving on the front, that means they're trying to switch gaps with who? The linebacker. So if we get more doubles and start running some gap stuff, now we're putting ourselves in a position where we got two guys trying to catch a moving target. That second level guy is going to be moving right into us. If we're like, for example, for this the left guard and the left tackle play side here, and then we've got a guy in the move that can kind of read this out on the way. So we find it, great cut, good footing, up slips at the end, as you can imagine. Now we just go right back to the other side. I think Zach Tom does a great job of. What am I looking at here? Wrong play. So exact same play. Excuse me. Now Sean Ryan does a great job of rolling his hips through on this block. You see his hands outside, but this is a picture perfect kind of hole if you're a running back, right? You've got everybody covered up, inside leverage to the running back, and he's got really a great seam right here to get through the safeties. I mean, these are big time plays, and again, in some ways, this turf kind of equals everybody out, right? There's going to be some opportunities on both sides. You're not getting really a true look of either team. I had to put this in, man. Look at Walker all the way downfield, man. It's such a big time play by him. I love when the big fella gets downfield. I remember Mike Flanagan was down. We were playing Minnesota Vikings. I think we ran a screen. I think Marco and I we did our jobs, peel backs and cutouts. Flanagan's like 50 yards downfield, man, just blocking like the linebacker, the safety, like long arm him for like 50 yards. I'm thinking like, dude, that might be the play of the year for an offensive lineman. These things are phenomenal. So when you talk about plays, or we're one play away, we're two plays away, like I have to look at these. So Eyes are going to the left, feet are going to the left. He just throws this thing out to the right, man. And this should be a pick six, no question about it. I mean, we get very, very lucky here, and we can show these plays on both sides. But my point to everybody is like, let's just pump the brakes a little bit on. We got a lot to work on. Win or lose, you always got a lot to work on. So when we motion out to trips, they have to adjust. What does that mean? They're going to go back to their single safety high. They're going to bring that safety down, and they're going to basically run their 5 across defense at about 10 yards. Okay, that's going to put single safety back. They're running essentially cover 3. You'll see it here, and you see it. Sorry, there's one guy ahead of the 40, but there's basically 4 or 5 guys on the 40 right now, and all standing flat-footed, staring at the quarterback. So what does that mean? If you run 2 guys high, there is so much space on that backside as long as you occupy the backside defensive back with a quick out route. Jaden gets the ball. There's no way you're making a tackle in space, especially on this field. All the way down in. Fantastic play call, fantastic throw. Great play by Jaden. This is what we talk about. Basics win ball game. So we have just very, very simple double team. I think Zach Tom just rolls his hits perfectly in here. We pull the backside guard. All right, so we don't get a lot out of Jordan Morgan right here as far as he takes too far a step inside. They play right into Zach, but Zach does such a good job of rolling and sustaining this block. Jenkins does a good job of coming through and get what he needs to get done. But Zach Tom really makes this play onto the safety. And those little things, like when you start talking about who really good players are in the National Football League, especially the tackle position, you get paid for your blocks, but you get credit for your runs. Penei Sewell is being, he just got paid, and he's being looked at as kind of the premier right tackle right now because that dude in the run game murders people. And Zach Tom, I don't know if like physically he's at that level, but when you just talk about guys that are trying to do the things the right way and trying to finish in the run game, fantastic job by him. We got 5 across. We're really just here. I'll show that again. Really basic concept. They're just trying to take advantage of the slot defender. So they're really basic on the outside and just trying to turn around at about the 32. And all we have to do is make a decision on what that slot defender does. We occupy the linebacker with the tight end, and he's got all the space to throw, but just a timing issue. And this kid, again, we don't know. He throws the ball behind. We don't know if that's because of the turf. We don't know if that's because of his footwork. There's a lot of stuff we still got to work out. Go 5 across again and empty, and they go blitz. So they look like they're going to show outside. They bring the mic. They drop the inside slot off the tight end on the right. Or excuse me, off the slot on the right into the middle. Now instead of keeping this high, he kind of plays it across. He's running into that defender. Jordan probably feels like he has to throw it a little bit higher now because of the angle. You get a step in, play on the football. Like these kind of things. And so how do you make that easier? You throw the ball earlier, right? You throw the ball as soon as you get it. And as a tight end, you get that angle a little bit higher. One way or another, you're going to get hit there. But you don't want to run into the second guy because running into the second guy makes that ball float a little bit. Motion and trips again, big time throw. I showed this one very similar earlier. Just trying to single up that receiver outside, running the out. Man, I love this. So we got 2 double teams, and these are the plays that started to become very, very effective for us with those moving targets, right? So you see the linebackers right here, and Myers gets a little bit of this guy. Safety comes in and just absolutely crushes the linebacker. They both whiff air. I mean, that's an all-time miss. That's the Sports Center, not top 10, man. Fantastic, fantastic friendly fire. Love it. You look at this hole, and one thing when you're playing well, like in the case of Elgin Jenkins, they're trying to run the ball over you a lot because you're just doing a nice job here of maintaining your balance. We just call that bumper footwork. closing the door, having a car crash with that linebacker as he shoots that A gap. Great run here by young man Manuel Wilson. And so, as we kind of go through this tape, 29 points. It's like, what are you going to do? 29 points. You should win. You should win every football game. You score 29 points. Okay. That brings us to the defense. I think some of this is not playing in the preseason. I think some of this is the shitty turf, and some of this might be not having good enough players to keep positions. Okay, but if you want me to put percentages on it, like I think the Eagles' offense is obviously a good amount better than our defense, particularly up front. I think that showed in our pass rush. Our lack of pass rush was astounding. How much of that is that they're game planning that Jalen Hurts is going to run and they don't want to run? I don't know. I don't know what their game plan was from a rush plan, but they are not winning anywhere across the board. And I think ultimately, again, when you look at this from a defensive standpoint, understanding how the Eagles play football, we have to look at, manning up, putting Jair Alexander in that position against that elite and receiver the entire game. Is that Does that make sense? We have to kind of maybe tone down his aggressiveness. He's such a good player, but we got to tone up. He had listen. That was a good matchup, right? But you have to say that AJ probably got the better of him just because of, if nothing else, the out and up that beat him for the touchdown. He had a couple other big plays where he missed tackles because he's being a little bit too aggressive, right? So we maybe have to tone down the aggression. We're going to play that kind of football, but those are for him and his coaches to decide. But really, the turf makes a huge difference on defense, and that's why this is such a high. In part, why this is such a high scoring game. We have to just look at now like formations, assignments, fits. We have to understand, especially from a formation assignment standpoint, because this is our first look at half of like what fits, what doesn't really make a lot of sense. So Jalen Hurts goes 20 for 34. He's got 282 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 turnovers. The big news: Saquon Barkley comes in. I mean, obviously had a huge first half. Uh, 24 carries, 109 yards, touchdown. He had two catches for 23 and a touchdown. I mean, the huge run in the first. The play in the first half is just scheme fantastic, right? Um, Brown finishes with 5 catches for what 119 and a touchdown. I just think when you really watch this game though, and I just don't know how much of it we can put on the turf. I think the Eagles' offensive line is net better than our defensive line. I don't think there's any doubt about that. If you think of our best matchup is, you know, Rashawn Gary versus anybody, and it's Lane Johnson. Now Lane, he gets a free sack because Lane's looking the wrong way, but like between Lane and Mailata, like I don't know if they really had to put themselves into a sweat this entire game. And again, it's going to be harder when you can't move on, you can't be as dynamic on defense. But we're just outmatched up front. We're outmatched by scheme. Hafley knew that they'd have to pressure, they'd have to bring some guys in the run game, and so all of that stuff works until it doesn't. And especially again with the turf, with the inconsistencies, with the lack of preseason preparation, you see times here with the fits, particularly at the second level, just aren't where they need to be. There was some stuff earlier coming out about do we have leverage in the right places, and we'll show a little bit of that. But the truth is, like, the Eagles did a good job of identifying how to get our guys in situations where maybe they were a shade instead of a 2-eye, or a 2-eye instead of a shade, or we had a linebacker out on the trips look and it had a safety down so we could run on the safety. Like, they did a good job of finding those spots and just kind of outflanking us at some opportunities. And that's what their job is. I mean, that's what they're really good at. So, little jet lag here, obviously, from the first play, fumble snap. Good start for the Packers. You're going to think they need to capitalize and put touchdowns on the board. So this is just an efficient play by Quay. This is what we've been looking for. We're just talking about movement now, identifying the play, and you're in a 5-man box, right? So they have to do something. They got to bring a second guy. So Keyshawn Nixon comes in and takes on the center pull here, right? This used to be Jason Kelsey, obviously new man now, but just an efficient play, I think, for me from Quay, as far as we watch footwork here, identify and go, right? If you can see this, as he gets older, he'll see that faster. Center pulls are out of there. Big play here. Just do your job. Like, just do. So what do I mean by that? So when you've got an option look on, everybody's got an assignment. Right now, Keyshawn Nixon's got the quarterback, right? You have Quay Walker sitting on the running back. So go do your job and take him out. And whether that means you have to get closer to the line of scrimmage, so you're not rushing from depth, because rushing from depth, you're giving him an extra 4 yards, and he's a good athlete, and you're running in soup. So it's just like it's little details. Like make sure you're doing your job the right way. Break down and make the play. This is a keep it simple, stupid moment, right? What am I saying by that? Everybody knows in the defense that every gap has to be covered by somebody, whether it's a defensive tackle, a linebacker, a safety, or a corner. Like every gap, C, B, A, B, C. Every gap has to be covered. So we can just look and oversimplify this and say, we know that Quay's probably got B gap and McDuffie's probably got A gap, right? Because nobody's spiking right here. They might be stepping down, but they're not spiking. So we look at the backside first on McDuffie. We got to step down, and we've leveraged ourselves into the B gap, but squished the A gap of the defensive tackle position. Now he obviously sees the cross motion coming from the tight end, but he's got to stay in his gap, right, and attack that line of scrimmage. If he wants to read it back, you can't shuffle over into the B or maybe even the C gap here, following the backside tight end on the cross block. Okay. And now the second part of this is, if we're going to Quay, when they show the cross block, that's not a reason for you not to take your gap. Now, if you allow, I think it's Mekhi Becton, who's like 300 a million pounds. If you're not going to go attack that B gap and you're going to let him double your defensive tackle, like, you got problems. What we want, the reason that you play a shade, is because the shade has natural outside leverage on that center, and it makes it much more difficult to move off the spot, because if you take that linebacker and put him in the gap where he's supposed to. But if you just sit behind this guy and they can just push, 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 all of a sudden there's a monster hole, and you haven't given yourself any momentum to do anything about it. And that kid's just way too fast to get through a hole, man. So they're talking to each other, and you can just see this. You can just hear this after, like, post snap. You're like, man, just run this guy over. This guy's soft as hell, right? Talking about the tight end for the Philadelphia Eagles. Wilson just absolutely trucks the backup tight end. What a great play by him. This is play design, guys. This is play design. This isn't a McDuffie thing. This is play design. So what do? They pull the backside guard. Okay. So he's got eyes on, so he has to stand. By the time he figures out what's going on, and they run off the corner. The safety's got inside or outside leverage on the slot, so he's faced in instead of face out by design. Okay, so they're going to run him inside. By the time McDuffie figures out what's going on, the far superior athlete is already going to have a little bit of leverage on him, and he's running a wheel route. And there's just no way you're going to get to this football. It's a great play call. I mean, to have to watch the guard go, and by the time you figure it out, fastest running back on the field is gone. So I look at the bottom of the screen here with AJ and Jay Alexander, and listen, man, this is just a tough matchup. So you're playing 10 yards off. We're bringing pressure. They're probably going to have an answer for it, because we know on this play in particular, they've got one less than we're bringing. So the only thing I'm saying is that yellow line is the sticks, and you're just giving him a lot of respect here, considering that it's probably going to be some sort of sticks throw to your side. Like, they're not going to run a go. And this is one of those where, I think he's probably given a lot of carte blanche because he's such a good player. I think if he looks at this one, maybe he wants to reconsider. So good play design again. I go back here. They look like they're going to run a little screen. And everyone's seen this play before, right? It's like the fake screen. They're going to run the second guy out. So they clear, and you've got the safety eyes on A.J. Brown. You've got Quay, instead of getting to the flat fast, he's worried about the in route. So he's staring at quarterback's eyes. And all of a sudden, there's this great little pocket. for that screen receiver to get open, and that huge play in the ball game. Yeah, you don't see this too often. So we've got a two tight end set. Everyone's stacked over to our left, to the offense's left. You've got a two-eye playing on the other side. I think that's Kenny, outside defensive end, and then you've got your linebacker over the top. So you've got 3 and 3, but you got the running back over there. So you're going to have to bring another. And this is what a lot of guys are coming in and saying, wait a second, I don't know if we're set right from a schematic standpoint. This is how they're going to run it. They just have to make a decision. Do they want to run a two-eye where this is an easy double team, or do they want to put this guy in the shade where we can kind of match, we can go man on man for our own gaps and have that linebacker come over the top and make the play on the backside. Now, when you put this guy in a two-eye, you just don't see this often. McKinney just gets absolutely thrown out the bar, and this all of a sudden becomes an easy play because Quay can't quite get to where he needs. There's no way Quay's making this play now. There's too much space, and Barkley's too good an athlete. So we can talk about defensive principles and schemes and whatnot, but if you're going to put the guy in a two-eye, you can't get thrown out the bar. Very simple. So you see the lockup. So this is with Javon Bullard, who's going to be a great player, certainly. So you see him locked up at the top of the tight end, or the receiver at the top of the screen. So you see that this is an obvious crossing route. Like, I don't know anything about it. I'm watching this like, oh, it's a crossing route. Good. They're gonna run shallow cross because everybody runs it, right? Well, he's given up. It looks like he had inside leverage, gives it up on the stem, and then it's like he's confused this is happening. This is a very standard NFL play. Ends up falling down. Again, another like 15, 20-yard gain. Like, these plays, they start adding up real fast. So much time in the pocket. So much time in the pocket. So there's two things here, right? I can't really show times where he's pressured. When he did have to throw the ball away, for the most part, he had held it for like 5 to 7 seconds. So they throw the wheel, and like, some of this is partially is I put partly. It's such a bad. Is that even English? Partially, partly. Is it partly? You can say partly maybe. But the turf sucks. But like, man, whiff, whiff. Just got to get better. Again, preseason football matters. If this game comes back to haunt you, or the way you start the season come back to haunt you, then you have to ask yourself, maybe we should try something new. This was the only real surprising play of the day for me. Is we look at Alexander at the top versus AJ Brown. Honestly, like, he's such a good player, and he's got this peg, and it's just interesting that he jumped on this look. He's a super aggressive guy, and sometimes he's maybe trying to read mail. This is really the only surprising one. Like, some AJ Brown's going to win some matchups. He's an amazing player, right? But this is the one that you just thought, like, man, why did you didn't think you'd jump that particular route at that moment? But that is how the game goes, and all of that adds up to a loss. I don't think it's a loss that is debilitating by any means, but it's difficult. So before we talk about Colts and reload, let's get into some listener stuff, man. Thank you guys as always for putting these up. I'll go through them as many as I can here. Did the offense make adjustments to get the run game going, or did they just play? But it made adjustments. Certainly, you're just trying to find that right play that works against the defense that they're using. We talked about it. They're moving a lot. We're good. What does Josh Myers need to do? Seeing him whiff at the goal line is reminiscent of college film. Yeah, listen, I would say this: the way that Josh plays is he's got the physical tools to play. His technique, he still plays over the top of himself, so his shoulders are always too far forward. Like, he's never in the base position. I shouldn't say never. Sometimes he's not in the base position that you want, and that makes him look silly at times. It takes away a lot of power, it takes away a lot of mobility. You gotta train it. It's got to be your number one priority. Hearing varied opinions about Quay and McDuffie's performance. I don't know from who. Should Cooper be starting over one of them? Cooper played, for the snaps that he got in, aggressive. Like what you see, just from an aggressive standpoint. Still undersized. We showed a couple of those where, I'm like, to keep it simple. There's places you need to be, but it really is kind of a mishmash in there at times, and you have to be scheme and assignment sound. It's difficult when guys are literally like their feet are in the ground and they're just moving the wrong direction because the turf is allowing them to move away. I thought for the most part, I thought both those guys did some things really well. You're always going to get exposed in the run game, or excuse me, in the passing game when you get like a Saquon Barkley against you. Or there's a lot of times in this game where we had McDuffie in particular would have to be like out guarding the slot and bounce out in the zone coverage, and all of a sudden have some sort of manners or matching responsibilities with a guy that like he's not equipped to beat. And I just think the Eagles did a probably a really good job of putting our guys in positions where through motion or structural or formational changes, you put either Quay or McDuffie away from the football out in space and brought like Nixon down in space, and you're going like, this doesn't really make a ton of sense. Uh, how do Walker and Tom? How do Walker and Tom shape compared to Clifton and Toucher? I don't know about shape. I don't know if we're talking about physical shape. I'm not going. I'm not touching that one. Uh, Walker and Tom compared to Clifton and Toucher were just like so. Clifton was, I played with Walter Jones, and he's the best player I've ever seen. Clifton is one of the most talented guys I've ever seen. I mean, he could do things. We would sit and film just from a speed standpoint, get as big as he was, just from a speed standpoint, his first kicks were so fast compared to everybody. And I'm quick. Flanagan's we're all quick, but he was faster than us. He was just flat out, he's a better human than we were. And Tausch, I've always said this, like Tausch is inexplicably um, gifted in his ability to maintain balance into contact. And I don't know that I've ever seen anybody as good as he is at absorbing pressure. I don't think there might not be a single part of his his pass set that you would go like, I want to borrow that, right? Until somebody touches him and they make pressure, and all of a sudden, like his ability to drop weight, like he's a sneaky athlete. His ability to drop weight in core is just very, very unique. So it's almost tough to like. I really like Zach Tom, and I think time will tell on that one. But let's just say that on the other side, Clifton's man, unbelievable. Did Jordan Morton secure the right guard spot after replacing Ryan during the game? Well, so they're going in and out. I talked about this before. For me, I would just give it to them because it seems like inevitably they're going to give it to them eventually. So, why don't we just live through the growing pains now and move on from it? Because I didn't see you're not seeing anything from either player that you're like, definitive better. But you're also looking at this like, how are we still here? How is this still happening? Like it's now we're in week 2. Like find a solution. Will Adrian Cooper take over starting linebacker? He should have clear advantage of the defense being out there. So he made a play off the edge. I think I cut it out, but it was because we had so much tape. But he made a play off the edge that I really liked. Even then, it was actually showing. I was actually showing that he was slipping. But Cooper's a really good player, really good talent. You have to understand the defense. You saw just how you bring a new defensive in. You got your veteran guys in there making some alignment and assignment errors, and then you see it just from a scheme standpoint. There's a lot of stuff where you're just out schemed and out leveraged, maybe more so in the passing game than in the run game. And everything you're trying to do is matching up a guy like one on one, like Dion used to. Oh, I was traveling with this guy, like that actually has some structural problems causes structural problems for the rest of the defense. Like just imagine if you're playing, man over here and you're trying to run zone everywhere else. And obviously that zone includes the backside guy who's now in man, usually having like a deep third or a deep court or whatever. So it kind of messes with you a little bit. And I think they do a good job of like identifying when we want to go just straight matchup over here versus, zone to maybe the trip side. But there's situations in every game where if guys are doing that, there's obvious holes in the defense if the quarterback can identify what that issue is. Is the O line looking that bad? Was it the field conditions? Philly's front four is good. I didn't think it was like I don't think anybody was overwhelmed. I think the movement hurt them for a while, but listen, we ended up with a really good day on the ground. We scored 29 points wins football games. I haven't watched the game. We've seen the same mistakes from year to year. For example, Myers Walk, yes, yeah. Slow, short answer, yes. Um, General thoughts on the D, and is Jones different than Jacobs? Okay, so general thoughts on the defense. I think we just talked about it. So Jones versus Jacobs. Jones had a big day for Minnesota. I believe so. I don't know his stats, but I think he had a good day. Um, Downhill versus a little more. I think I would say I don't know that Jones is a better pure runner than Jacobs. I don't think that's true at all. I think maybe from a dynamic playmaking standpoint, what he has, just his lateral movement, his ability in the passing game, all that, and then all the intangibles that we don't necessarily know that Jacobs doesn't have. He was a team captain in Oakland, so I mean Las Vegas, good lord. I think from a pure running standpoint, you're looking at just different styles, but both very, very effective. And I don't know that one's better than the other. I think what we talk about Jones is just seeing this offensive line, especially early on, missing things. And then we saw what Jones was doing the last 5 games of the season last year with essentially the same group, making lemonade out of lemons sometimes. And I think that maybe that's just a time thing for them to understand what Josh Jacobs is going to be better at, or what our line's able to do against good teams. But I had made a comment earlier that they're missing Jones a little bit. I think I said that after the first half. In the second half, they come back and they actually listen, had a lot of really good runs. I think Jacobs is probably going to be more of that kind of guy, anyways. How are we going to start fast? Well, that has something to do with him certainly, but it also has a lot to do with how's Emmanuel Wilson coming along? Is Marshawn Lloyd going to come back and be healthy? What's he going to look like? And then is our offensive line going to move anybody off the spot for the first quarter? It says breakdown of Rashid's poor game. I don't know how poor it was in comparison to other people. I mean, he certainly, yeah. I don't think the Packers going anywhere from here at left tackle. I wasn't aware that he played that poor of a game. Certainly, again, preseason matters when you're watching. If you watch practice, and there's just not a lot of live reps, and they're not playing in the preseason. You just have to. You look at games like this, and you're like, "Come on, man! Like this is why this happens." It's like I think who was it? Peyton talking about Ayuk's holding out. Like for some guys, maybe for Walter Jones, he used to miss every training camp. It doesn't matter. Like for some, mostly like 99%. Like for me, it would matter. Like me not playing the preseason would be a problem. Like I got along. You can get away with it, but you still got to get a week or two in, and it's like some real reps. Hard to tell as an amateur, but how much of the pressure on low state of the O line versus good for the defense? Um, Again, I don't know how much pressure though. I mean, the Philadelphia Eagles are a really good defense. I don't know how much pressure there. I don't know if there's like an outstanding amount of pressure more than we thought there was going to be. I think the play calling is limited by the field conditions. Again, um, I didn't think he was under that much duress. This wasn't like a 5-sack game or he was getting hit every play by any means. So, yeah, not time to pick. Not time to panic. I think the only thing we don't want to talk about is just moving on. We got the Colts next week. I watched a ton of Colts film yesterday, actually, for some other stuff. I'm going to tell you this: defense, you are going to have your hands full with Anthony Richardson. We'll talk about it. Probably one of the sickest throws I've ever seen in my life live. I mean, just backpedaling to your left, throwing it 70 yards, 75 yards. I mean, it was just unbelievable. The guy's incredibly talented. Obviously, with their running game, and their offensive line is looks like they're trying to play downhill a little bit more. They gave the Texans all they could handle. The Texans are a really good football team. I think walked out of there 29-27. I'm looking at the defensive side of the football. And we talk about Rasheed Walker. I think he's going to have this is going to be a good matchup. I think the best matchup of the day, though, is by far their defensive tackle 99 is at Buckner versus Elton Jenkins on that side, because that's two really good players. Buckner's still a really good player. He was a good player in with the Niners. He's a great player now. They can move him around, and if I'm them, I actually thinking about it now, they're probably going to put him over the right, whoever the right guard is as often as possible. But I think there's some good matchups. The UCLA rookies out there playing backup right defensive end. He's a good player. He's got a lot of movement to him. He's got some good head movement. We should be looking to drop at least 30, which I know is one better than 29. But again, 29 points wins you football games in this league. So, you know, I'll try to get a little more of a video preview out before the end of the week. But until then, man, thanks for watching. Thank you to our host, Bet Online. If you're liking the show, hit like, subscribe, rate, and review this. It's been a while, guys. Jeez, a little rusty. Subscribe, rate, and review this on our Prostitute Perform channel on YouTube. Mike Wahle 68 on Twitter, man. Thank you for your time. Any more questions, hit me up. See you next time.